Human conflict is inevitable. What isn't inevitable is the efficient and fair resolution of conflict. The program on negotiation, in its essence, is devoted to improving the theory and practice of negotiation and conflict resolution. Who's representing whom? Central to our work is developing the next generation of scholars to be concerned with conflict resolution and improving methods of teaching people how to more efficiently and fairly deal with their conflicts. The books and materials created by scholars affiliated with the program on negotiation have, during the last 30 years, transformed the way millions of people think about and view conflict. Our national leaders today constantly face questions relating to the limits of negotiation. Should we be negotiating with North Korea? With respect to Iran, should we resist or should we engage? These kinds of questions fascinate us here within the program on negotiation. What motivates all of us is the idea that through our research and our teaching, through the materials we develop, here at the program on negotiation, we can help people, not simply in this country, but around the world, become more effective in terms of dispute resolution.
We decided to look at the most difficult negotiations globally in finance and the arts, and the men and women who undertook them and succeeded where many others had failed. Our very first great negotiator was George Mitchell. At President Clinton's request, he went to Northern Ireland. The Troubles, as they were called, between the Catholics and the Protestants had gone on for over 30 years. George Mitchell went in and ultimately, with the Good Friday Accords, set in motion a progress that led to what's now a much more peaceful situation. Then we turned to Lakhdar Brahimi, a former foreign minister of Algeria, for putting together a broadly representative government in Afghanistan after the Taliban were initially ousted. Another of our great negotiators was James Baker. He really moved onto the global stage when the Berlin Wall fell and very difficult negotiations between the then Soviet Union and the United States, really to finish the unfinished business of World War II. Almost immediately after that negotiation was completed, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and Baker led the effort to build an international coalition to oust Saddam from Kuwait, a remarkable man across multiple negotiations. It's not only been war and peace, though. Take the artists, Christo and Jean-Claude. He, a Bulgarian émigré, she of the French aristocracy, with these conceptions. They wrapped the Reichstag in Berlin, they wrapped the Pont Neuf in Paris, and then imagine if you had the idea to put in Central Park 1,000 or more gates in the heart of New York City. Any number of groups said no way. And Christo and Jean-Claude somehow managed to persuade them to create this work of art that captivated literally millions. They didn't even think of themselves as negotiators until we gave them the award, at which case they gave us some of the most remarkable lessons in persuasion and long-term negotiating campaigns. The students and executives that we teach throughout Harvard and the program on negotiation are an ambitious group. They can learn a lot from the great negotiators.
One of the things they teach you, and is a very important lesson, is not to think about negotiated agreements as a zero-sum game. And I think the same is true for thinking about negotiation in the first place, that even if you cannot resolve the entire dispute, it does not mean that you cannot find areas of mutual interest. I came to Harvard after 5 years in the Israel Defense Forces, working in their JAG Corps and doing international law work, and being involved in sort of the most contentious political security-related issues that Israel faces. I've learned that there are certain things you can actually learn that make you a better negotiator. It's very important to know what your own strengths and weaknesses are as a negotiator, And they're also very useful analytical tools sort of to look at the chessboard and understand what the possible moves are, what happens at the table, behind the table, or alongside the table. And I think this is what we try to do in our scholarship, and this is what we try to do in teaching and training the next generation.
It wasn't just three institutions, Harvard, MIT, and Tufts Fletcher School coming together kind of in a formal way. What it began with was people coming together. Inter-university cooperation anytime is difficult. So what was amazing about this particular cooperation is that it was a recognition that each of these three institutions had particular strengths. If you asked any specialist in negotiation, that person would admit it's a multidisciplinary experience. Well, that means you have all of these disciplines that are sitting at the table. Excellent political scientists, excellent lawyers, excellent economists, excellent game theorists, and it created a very exciting mix for all of us.
I think if you got the feedback.
We never thought about it as a field. I mean, I think people now would say, oh, you got together and you got people from all these different disciplines and you made a new field. And I said, I think we have, but we had no idea that that's what we were doing when we were doing it. We were trying to pool our knowledge, figure out what we could learn together to be helpful in real situations. Suddenly, we were looking at the emergence of a new field. Then we started to think about how can we capture this and put it in a form that can help other people teach conflict resolution. So the program on negotiation created a clearinghouse, and we began to transform all the research we were doing into teaching materials. And then people all over the world started to not just take the books, but these new teaching materials into their syllabus, into their curriculum, into their way of teaching.
What I find really exciting about the executive education program at the program of negotiation is that we assemble this global group of leaders in their various fields, in business, in government, in the military, in other sectors, and we bring them to Cambridge and we try to deliver to them the same content that I deliver at Harvard Business School to my MBA students and at the law school to my JD students. But obviously we do it in a more compressed way. We give the participants a toolkit that allows them to prepare more systematically, more effectively for their various negotiations that they are involved in. We give them better table tactics, better ways of communicating and really understanding where the deal space might be in the room. I think that most participants in these programs do experience a transformation. And it's not a transformation in some simplistic way, it's a transformation in mindset and approach to the negotiation process itself. And they go back to their various organizations with a better sense of how to negotiate.
The program on negotiation has the most amazing cast of characters who provide tremendous insight about real-world negotiations, how to think about real-world negotiations, how to intervene, how the psychology of the human mind interacts with negotiations. Looking at barriers to negotiation agreements is a broad theme of the program on negotiations. One of my specialties has been looking at what is it about how we think that keeps us from acting as rationally as we would hope to. For me, training the next generation of scholars had always been a passion. It's the part of my professional life that I take the most pride in. And since I've been at Harvard, I've had the most amazing doctoral students any professor could hope for. And that's been supported by the program on negotiation in so many ways. We're constantly moving back and forth from the laboratory to the teaching simulation. We often go from real-world insight and then take that into the lab. And the lab means working with simulations and see how outcomes are affected in predictable ways. Then hopefully some part of our research team will also take the same idea into the field and see if we can replicate the same idea that we worked through in the lab to show its real-world relevance.
This work continues and indeed will never be finished. But we're very committed to the notion that through research and scholarship, there's the possibility of continuing to improve how people deal with conflict. That's the core commitment of those of us at the Program on Negotiation. Our work continues. Brick upon brick, we're helping build a foundation. In the 21st century, what is plain is that peoples all over the world are ever more independent. It's going to be essential that we learn how to communicate with and resolve our differences with people that are very different from ourselves. We're no longer isolated. And in fact, in this world, I think the work of conflict resolution and dealing fairly and efficiently with disputes becomes even more important.